Good evening.
Good evening.
So we're gathered here tonight to learn about life and legacy planning. I'd like to keep this interactive, and I'm going to introduce myself in just a bit, but don't be shy if you have some questions. This is more of a 30,000-foot view of life and legacy planning, and at the end I'm going to give you some ideas about how you might organize some of the issues that we'll talk about. I hope most of you are computer literate and not afraid of technology, because I think the solutions that I'm going to give to you are on the internet. But I urge you to if you haven't used a lot of technology solutions, to be flexible, and I think there's some really neat tools out there that can help you plan your life. So with that, let's get started. So I'm here, I'm the Executive Director. My name is Gary Morgan. I'm with the Golden Years Advisory Network. And really that came together a couple of years ago, a group of like-minded professionals, all of whom service seniors and their families, decided to come together and create a single point of contact for people that need help with all the issues of aging, basically. And that covers housing, transitions, legal, financial, and healthcare. And increasingly, as you all would probably understand, life is getting more and more complex as not only the healthcare system and navigating that, but a lot of the issues with housing and how am I going to live, and how am I going to transition, and legal and financial is those issues are increasingly complex. So the question we ask, are you ready for your golden years? I hope so. Now, what is a life plan? Anybody have any ideas about what life planning is all about? No? So I'm just going to read something. This was, life planning is a guided process by which an individual takes stock of his or her life, clarifies your goals and challenges, and identifies the steps needed to move forward. So that's all encompassing, I would say. And I don't know, I think we all do life planning in our heads. We may not put it on paper, we may not document it, but I think we're all sort of figuring out how we're going to move forward based on all of the variables that come together in our life. So there you go, I had it on the slide. I have to read it. So what is legacy? Well, if you look at the dictionary definition of legacy, it's a gift of property, especially personal property such as money, or anything handed down from the past, such as heirlooms or things. That's what the dictionary, that's how that defines legacy. I think legacy is much broader than that, and we're going to talk about that. In fact, Ken Dykewald, he founded a company called AgeWave. He's the CEO, and he consults with Fortune 500 companies about the fact that there's this longevity economy, the fact that we have this large aging demographic. Traditionally, companies have paid attention to the younger demographic, the 18 to 25-year-olds, especially the retail things. But he consults with them about why they need to shift their focus because of the extraordinary, not only number of consumers, but the amount of money that's going to be entering this older demographic. Well, he got together with an insurance company, and they conducted a survey focusing on elder generations and the baby boomer children, and they discovered 4 pillars of legacy. And those 4 pillars are property and money, possessions of emotional value, instructions and wishes to be fulfilled, and values and life lessons. So, property and money, pretty self-explanatory. Possessions of emotional value, we all have those. I mean, I have a watch from my great-grandfather that he was given when he retired from the railroad in East St. Louis. And, it's just sitting up there on the shelf. It probably doesn't have much value to anybody else except me, and I'll probably never get rid of it. But that's an example of things with emotional value. Instructions, wishes, some of that gets down to the healthcare planning that hopefully we're all kind of going through, and how do we want our end of life to happen, and some of that decision making, or maybe when we pass, how we want our estate to be distributed. And then values and life lessons, just, as we live longer over a period of time, we all have experiences And I think many of us would like to pass those experiences down to our children. And it's hard sometimes because, like I have a couple children in their 20s now, they're not children anymore. But they don't always want to hear what dad says. But so you try to find other ways to influence them based on the values that they have. What do you think when AgeWave asked each of the parties what they thought was the most valuable of those four? How do you think they responded? Any suggestions?
Property and money.
Yes,
Property.
right.
That's what you would think, right? Yeah, I mean, but
You
it's
think so?
values and life lessons.
Wow. I
In
mean,
fact-
that would be my choice, but I was
Yeah,
thinking that they would say.
it wasn't even close. If you look,
Wow.
86% family history and stories, 77% life lessons and values.
How long ago was that?
Well, I think it was maybe a few
2012.
years, but
2012.
2012?
2012.
So like if they were to do it now, today, would it still, I'm just curious if it would
Yeah, I
still
don't know.
be that.
I mean, 6 years, not that long ago, but hopefully I think it would be the same. And so, it's not really the next, but why life and legacy planning is becoming more popular. There's a couple of really good reasons for that. Number one, we're living a heck of a lot longer, If you were in the Neanderthal phase, you would only expect to live to 20 years old. Well, you didn't really need to do a lot of legacy and life planning at that point. But now, we're living 71, 81, and much older in many cases. So that's one reason. There's, we have a longer life. We need to do more life planning. And then we have, because of the baby boomers, because of that aging demographic, we have an upward curve on the amount of people over 65 that will be in the population. And this chart shows that, we might be at about 5% now of the population over 65 in the United States. But if you go out to 2030, it's projected to grow to almost 25%. So that's what I was talking about. Guys, is that a little difficult to read?
I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, so it's, I know ignore a couple of those boxes,
But
just look at the
80
numbers.
years.
So you're looking at 3.8% in 1980, and it went, if you look at 2030, it's going up to almost 25%. And that's a result. So we're living longer, and there's going to be a lot more of us, and that's why there's been a increased demand in doing some legacy and life planning. And of course, as we all get, more of us are older, we have the mental issues. We have the cognitive decline that just comes naturally with aging. And sometimes it manifests itself with dementia and Alzheimer's, and that's not a good thing, but it does really mean that we should make sure that we've documented what our wishes are before any of that could possibly happen to us. And let me go back. Just to reinforce, today 1 out of 9 people over the age of 65 had Alzheimer's disease. I think that includes dementia. If you translate that into millions, right now it might be about 5 million people in the United States, and that's going to grow to almost 14 million by 2050. So again, huge problem for the society. And then because we have all this wealth, and it was a pretty good period for baby boomers. I mean, we've had relative prosperity, and there you have all this wealth accumulation. Now, you may not individually feel it, I know I don't, but there's going to be the largest intergenerational transfer of wealth that's going to happen over the next couple of decades. Again, that points to the need for some better planning. So what are the components of your legacy? Any ideas other than financial, right? Obviously financial assets. Well, let's look at some of these. Are probably the ones that the most people would say. You always include a will because the will sort of describes how you want your assets divided when you pass. More and more people are, advanced directives. If you haven't, you should have some type of advanced directives. We'll cover that in just a second. Guardianship appointments, I think that's more for younger children. If you have children under the age of 18, I mean, you really should document who would you want their guardian to be in the case you weren't there. Because if you don't, yes.
Well, it would also be for someone who can't take care of them.
It's true, yeah, and I think advanced directives cover some of that in the healthcare and financial proxies.
An adult
that-
child who's disabled.
Absolutely, yeah, no question, absolutely. So, I mean, these are things that are part of your legacy. Estate planning, wealth preservation, these are sort of common, most people would get to these answers. And then, of course, you know, there's other situations that may not impact all of us. I mean, some of us may want to leave money to a charitable organization, or we might want to fund our grandson or granddaughter's education. If you have a business, there's planning you should do to ensure succession and continuity. And then increasingly, the topic of end-of-life planning is becoming more complex, and how do you communicate exactly what your desires are when you need it most? And there's some different documents, such as this PULSE document, Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. That really
What's
is
that again? Physicians for?
Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And so what the reason being is, and most advanced or living will, for example, doesn't really cover emergency. It does a good job at covering, you know, how you want to be treated when you're near the end of your life. But it doesn't do a good job at covering emergency situations. So if you needed emergency CPR or to shock you, to bring you back, I mean, there's some cases where people would not want that. Most of the time, you're going to get it whether you want it or not, unless you've clearly documented it and then you've communicated. And with all these documents, you know, just writing it on paper doesn't really do the job. The effectiveness is dictated by how effectively you've communicated with your medical professionals. So you really need to have conversations with your doctors. You got to make sure that that he understands, plus, you know, spreading the word to the people that are most likely to treat you in the event of a care episode. And then funeral arrangements, obviously, you know, some people like to plan their funerals at a time. 64% of Americans do not have a will. That's, you know, it's the reality. You know, I think it's something we always, well, I'll get to it tomorrow. It's easy to put off, and we always think we're gonna live forever. So, and then 75%, it's a little blurry, but 75% of Americans do not have an advance directive. That goes down to 50% for those over 65, but still way too high. So what are advance directives? It's really healthcare proxy. In other words, who do you appoint to make decisions in the event that you're incapacitated? That's your healthcare proxy. Living will, which again describes, you know, some of the treatments that you would want during if you were near the end of life. And then do not resuscitate orders, DNR. Again, that gets back to that PULSE, but it gets back to, you know, what happens in certain situations. Do you want to be intubated, resuscitated, shocked? You know, some of that is, you know, you're pretty severe. So there's times when you don't want those types of life-saving treatments. And again, I think, you know, we're all pretty young in this room, so I think we probably do want them. But, you know, again, certain situations dictate different courses of action. So holistically, let's look at estate planning. So really, all those things can fall into estate planning. And, you know, will and so your legacy planning, but, you know, I think a lot of people, you look at trusts over there, for example, they say, well, trusts are only for the wealthy, doesn't apply to me. But in fact, a trust really can apply to almost anybody of any income level, of any age level. And it gets down to, there's certain, let's see, I have a slide, but there's certain benefits to trusts. For example, if you have a will goes through probate when you die. That's public information. So any will that's probated can be accessed by anybody. It's public. The way you make that private is create a trust, and then the terms of the trust are only known to you and your attorney. So, I mean, that's one example. There's other reasons. In a trust, you can spell out in greater detail how you want to divide assets, exactly what you want to happen in certain situations, but it's really for almost anybody. It's not just for the wealthy. So values and life lessons. So what, you know, we talked about what some of the, a little bit about it, but there's some additional legacy components that have been pretty standard. Like, I don't know if you've heard of the legacy letter. That's where an ethical will, that's really where someone is documenting their sort of the spiritual beliefs, their faith beliefs and things like that, or their values there. Life stories that you have, you may want to document that in a life planning process. Family heirlooms, family history, and then we'll talk about your digital legacy, which is becoming increasingly important. So we all have stories that we want to preserve. You know, what happens, I swear I have this box of pictures my dad passed, and you know, I know he told me, but I'm looking at some of the pictures and I just can't remember who the people are in the pictures. I wish I remembered. And so there are ways to sort of, take upload that picture and narrate a story behind it. It takes a little bit of work, but increasingly there are tools out there to help you do that if that's something that you want to do. It really does have value for your heirs, that they can understand exactly who you came from, who was important in your life in the early years. What type of lessons, but that's, the stories, preserving one's life stories, I think is perhaps more important to the people that we're passing them to than to us in some cases. But you don't recognize that until usually after it's too late. And these are examples, what did your grandparents do for a living? Where did you find your faith? What's your secret of raising a successful family? I mean, hopefully you get a chance to tell that to them while they're still alive, but sometimes, different things happen. And who inspired your career path professionally, and what advice would you give to the younger person that's starting out his career, or her career? An ethical will and a legacy letter, sort of the same thing, interchangeable. So they impart important personal values and beliefs, spiritual values, hopes and blessings. These are all things that are important, I think, for some, not everybody, but for some people, they would like to document things and have their grandchildren understand how, what their belief system was. So your digital legacy. So what's a digital legacy? What does that mean? I don't know. I mean, if you're online these days, right, if you have a Facebook account, good way to keep track of your kids and grandkids and at least see pictures. I mean, I know I like to look at the pictures. I don't really post a lot, but digital legacy is social networks, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, any blogs. Some people that are writers maintain blogs, and they write about different topics. You might have memberships or to different online communities other than some of the social networks. Any music that you own, or photos that you have, if you have them stored or backed up. And then if you sell things on eBay or Amazon, you have an account information, and what happens if you're no longer here. And if maybe you pay your bills online, who has access to that login information to be able to take care? And a lot of times what happens is if someone passes away, I mean, all these online sources, they don't know right away that you're no longer with us. So you really have a window of time, and if you plan it so that somebody has access to the information exactly how you want this information, it's online to be handled. Once it's out there on the internet, it's mostly there forever. But I think there are things that you can do to sort of protect yourself when you're no longer here for that information. And so it's important to document, passwords and how you want that information handled when you're not here. So what are the resources out there to back up your life? And I'm going to hit you with a lot of examples, and you're probably not going to be able to write it all down, so I encourage you to just email me. If you're interested, I can send you a copy of the slides, and it'll have some of the web addresses there, and you may want to investigate some of them. I'm going to give you 18 very quickly that help somebody to document some of the things that we talked about online securely, so that you can have it accessible to your designee at an appropriate time. Afternote. And you're gonna see, there's some different, some of these have focused on end of life, some of them focus on parting words to a loved one when you leave this world. Some of them, it's about documenting your, you know, your estate plan, different parts you've been out, but there's all kinds, and you know, I don't know who, you know, it's private, they're probably produced by organizations, or maybe in some cases, individuals that are putting these sites up there. And so my only concern is sometimes that if you're not, I have some favorites I'm gonna show you at the end. And they're mostly a favorite because I think they're gonna be here for the long haul.
Yeah.
Yes,
Are they charging for this?
some of these are, you know, some of these they're charging,
It's a way to make money.
some of it's free, some of it's a way to make money, sure. Yeah, it's a service like anything else, and, you know, they'll provide. So Afternote, this is one example. This is just screenshots, so I'm not gonna be able to actually go into each of these, but again, if you went to the website, you could investigate yourself. After Vault, and it's funny, the names they come up with for some of these sites is really good. After Vault, so I guess it's a vault where you're storing everything that's relevant to your afterlife. 50% off coupon, that tells me they're charging. Be celebrated, so, okay, that's, there you have, celebrate your life now and forever. So you can upload, you can watch a video tour there, it'll tell you. Boxigo, I have no idea how they came up with that name. Twitter is for what you're doing, Facebook is for what you've done, Boxigo is for what you want to keep. Okay then. And you keep it private, so just a way to store things that you want to keep private from others. Chronicle of Life, save a photo, write down a memory, keep a journal online. All these need a password and account to get into, so. Digital Remains, I don't know, I like that. Taking care of your will and digital afterlife. I think this is actually a UK company. Here's some more, go through them quickly. Directives online, so again, healthcare directives, things that, you know, would be documented in paper, but this is, I mean, that's a problem, right? Even if you have a will, it's probably in a drawer somewhere. So it's like, how do you make sure that it gets into the right hands and they know it's your sort of last will, your final wishes? DocuBank. That looks like you can actually store your healthcare providers in there. Estate map, different Facebook to funeral plans, everything in between, begin now. Notify Me with a K, Notify Me, or whatever manages your digital heritage. Legacy with, now it doesn't have the 8, but if you look at the actual address, it's LEG8CY, the number 8. So it's somebody's play on words, I guess. My Wonderful Life, plan for your funeral and your memories, upload your memories, create a book. And then the last 6 of the sort of 18 that I'm going through here quickly. My Goodbye Message, you wanted to write, it used to be you write a letter, now you do it online. My Memoriam, I guess that's a play on memorializing your wishes, goals, most precious memories.
With all the identity theft and everything, identity scams and stuff that are going on, like, what's to keep all of this really
Yeah, I mean,
private? They say you use your passwords and.
Well,
how-
it's a good question, and I don't know that I have a good answer for you. You should always be, anymore, like Google, right, the biggest search engine out there, they're really promoting that everybody has a secure site, or else they're telling you that the site is not secure. So you look for that green padlock in the upper left-hand corner, and HTTPS means secure. So HTTP is a protocol that's used on the internet, but the S at the end means it's a secure. So, you know, I think it's about having good passwords, making sure, and there are password managers out there to help you create a very long, you would never be able to remember, but the program remembers for you password. But, you know, having strong passwords, making sure the site is secure with the proper protocols, which, you know, just look for the green padlock up in the corner. And, you know, other than that, you have to just make sure you understand who's behind the website that you're using. Are they reputable? Are they going to make sure? And even having said that, right, some really reputable companies have been hacked. And, you know, my philosophy is you cannot be afraid of it, because, you know, that's progress, that's the way the world is going, and I just think you just have to be smart about it and what you disclose out there and how you disclose it. Digital time capsule, create personalized future messages. I guess you could put a, you know, every month send a different message to somebody for a period of time after you're gone. Would that be it? Might be, I don't know. Your chance to say goodbye. Again, a lot of these are sort of geared towards that final message to your loved ones. Wishes keeper. This is funeral instructions, banking document locations. So here's my favorite. And LegalZoom, not because it really helps you to collect this information, but if you don't have a lawyer, you know, lawyers can be expensive, I understand that, and it's sometimes difficult to convince yourself that, you know, you're gonna be able to spend the $3 to $5 grand for a will or whatever. But, you know, LegalZoom, you can document, they will actually have some pretty, you can talk to an attorney if you want, and they tend to be cheaper than a private attorney, but you can also download like a template for a will or an advanced directive and sort of do it yourself. Now, you know, depending on your situation and the complexity of your life, I don't always recommend that, but it is a start. And I think if nothing else, it gets you to think about what some of the issues are. And so that when you do eventually meet with an attorney, you'll have already thought about all of the things that were sort of in the template that LegalZoom had. And, you know, you might want to check it out. It's also designed for businesses who want to create, you know, people that are just starting businesses, want to create an LLC or some kind of incorporate themselves. But it can be useful for some of the standard things that everybody should be looking at. Everplans is my personal favorite. I actually have an account. They have venture capital money behind them. I think they just raised $400 million. But they've really positioned themselves as a white label product for financial services firms. So you'll see a lot of financial services firms starting to offer Everplans as an extension of what they do to provide you additional value in what they do. But it's basically, you know, for everything financial, healthcare, legal. I mean, it has a lot of lists, and it'll lead you through some of the things, questions, and how, you know, what you need to answer and what you should be storing up there. You can also online create a designee. So again, this would be the person that in the event something happened to you would have access to your account and be able to and then they have a letter that, just in case letter, like, just in case something happens to me, here's my instructions, that type of thing, which is good. And I think they're going to be here for a while, so because they seem to be well funded, and $75 a year is, I think, worth it. It's not that much. Kate, I put it on here because it is free, and they have on their homepage they really let me just go. I have here. So here's the homepage for LifeZoom or LegalZoom. And you'll see they deal with business formation, but they have wills and trusts, and you can actually speak to an attorney. Here's Everplans, and that's the homepage of that. But you can get a free account for a period of time to explore it. They don't charge you right away. You can go through it, but you can pretty much put everything. But so Kate, they position themselves as an end-of-life planning tool, but really, if you look, they have everything there. So they have a lot of questions, lists about different things. Here's what you should be considering for all your health care, or for legal, or for financial and lifestyle types of things. So it's a good, if nothing else, it's a good resource. Even if you don't use it, it's a good resource just for investigating some of the different topics and some of the questions. that might benefit you to consider. And then, I also have an account on here, and I haven't used it extensively yet. You know, it's one of those things that it's gonna take some time, because I gotta sit down with the pictures, and it gives you the ability, a bunch of tools to be able to create either videos or to narrate stories behind certain pictures. You know, to me, that would be valuable if I could select a handful of I think, pictures that maybe tell a story, and then I could supplement that with my own voice and my own narration, and maybe share that story with others. That this is and they make it easy as possible. You know, it's for those that are not used to dealing with this type of technology. It may not be easy, but it's as easy as it can be. And then they have a lot of different products that supplement. And I think they're mostly free, but then there's a lot of ancillary products that if you wanted to buy them, you could buy them, that have to do with that. So you can create a blog, you can create slideshows, you can create picture audios. Create your legacy.online would get you there. So I covered a lot. What questions do we have? Is there anything that I didn't cover? Do you have a specific question about anything? So there's, you know, life planning is a very broad topic. You know, really Golden Years was formed to help people with many of those topics. And so, you know, if you ever, we have many professionals that are members of the Golden Years Advisory Network, and I'd be happy to refer you to them for a conversation. I mean, they don't charge for initial conversations, but we have estate planning attorneys, and we have people that help you with downsizing and auctioning off things if you want to, you know, you're moving from a big house to a small house and you have to get rid of some things, so they can help you with that. We have realtors that, you know, sort of understand the nuances for assisted living and memory care and different types of senior living facilities, so we can help you with that. But, you know, I'm also available. I gave you that email that I gave you on that information. If, you know, just email me. I'm happy to try to answer your questions in any way I can. You know, we're trying to provide a service and trying to provide a lot of presentations within the community to sort of educate people on the issues surrounding aging. So this is just one, there are many. So no questions? We've got a pretty quiet group here. Yes?
I guess I'm just curious that you spoke about the internet kind of stuff, because I've thought about that in my head, like what happens when a person dies and all this stuff is out there? Can it ever be erased, or like,
Yeah, and that's
are
why.
we supposed to erase it, or?
Well, you know, that's why you probably need somebody that's your advocate, so that, with instructions, so that, you know, after you're gone, this person has access to your password and they will execute on what you want. If you want to, please take this account and delete it, you know, and, or, you know, in most cases, I think, right, to the extent that you might, some of it you might not care about, but other stuff you might want to say, you know what, I'd just like that to be deleted. I don't need that to be there for perpetuity. But it's, you know, that's the thing. Once things are in the internet, they usually stay there for a long time in some shape or form. Now, I know that each of the, like Facebook and Twitter, they all have their own policies regarding, I think on Facebook you can go in and actually assign a delegate as someone that can make your decisions if you're no longer able to about your account. They all have, they're starting to, with all the privacy issues that are coming up, they're all putting in place their own policies regarding how you can better protect your information and you know, what you can do. So I urge you to, you know, go onto your accounts there if you have one, and if you go into the settings, usually there's, you know, information, and you go to privacy, and they have that documented in their policies. And I'd be happy to help you find it, you know, investigate it. If you have a specific account that you want to discover more information about how you protect your information, I'd be happy to do that for you. Yes?
I think it's important too, just like to really research wherever you're gonna be going, because I was a caregiver for both of my parents in Annapolis, and even when we had hospice that came in, later on, and this was like months later on, there was an attempted, a thing on the account that had been traced back to a quote-unquote reputable hospice company.
Mhm.
So it's like, we were raised like to trust people, and nowadays it's like, yeah, who can you trust?
I know, I
And
get-
it's like, it's almost scary because you're making really, really important imperative decisions, and you want the people that you're dealing with to be reputable and honest, and it's.
I get emails, and I think I'm pretty good at spotting them, and I know what to look for sometimes, but boy, there's a couple that they get really good, and like you say,
The
wow.
scams.
You have to be able to, I always look at the, even if they have a sort of alias name up there, I always look at what the address is behind, the email. But, yeah, they call that phishing, right? It's these emails that come in, they want to try to get you to provide some information that you wouldn't normally provide. It's right, it's a little bit of the Wild West. I think it will slowly be improving because there's just too much pressure being brought to bear by not only the government, but the people in general about concerns about privacy, and then with all these incidences of hacking that go on and the personal information. So increasingly, they're going to improve the security controls that are out there. And you might have heard of blockchain technology, which is the technology behind Bitcoins. Well, Bitcoins, is sort of electronic currency, though. But the technology behind it is sort of a distributive processing model, which has the potential to offer a really secure way of communicating financial information or any type of personal information that would be almost impossible to hack, just because of the way the infrastructure is set up and the way they verify data and transactions. So you'll hear, I'm sure, from time to time, it's, most of the big companies are investing in learning and using and trying to figure out how they can use it to improve their operations, improve the security.
You should have copies of your advance directive.
Well, certainly your loved ones or your somebody that's close to you that is you trust. You should really have a talk with your physician. I mean, that's the most important, because I've been in healthcare for a long time, and here's if something happens and there's people, usually the medical professionals are going to make the decisions unless they have something that they somehow have knowledge that that's against your wishes. So in other words, if you're on, my dad had congestive heart failure, and was on hospice at the end of life. Right? Well, he had it sort of a DNR, so do not resuscitate. I mean, there was a point, that was what he wanted. He says, I'm tired of going to the hospital and, spend a week in the hospital, and they tune you up with drugs and they put you out and leave to go back a couple months later. And, but if you don't, that's if you're on hospice, usually they make sure that the right people know. But it's that type of communication. You really need to let, number one, your physician, got to have the conversation. You got to make sure that all the places where you potentially might have care in the event of an emergency, whatever, if you've documented that with whether it's a living will or whether it's a POLST, the physician order for sustaining life, make sure that copy exists with the emergency room of, like I go to Paoli, that's where I would most likely go. But make sure your physician knows, and then make sure your medical advocate, whoever is designated to make decisions in the event that you cannot make them. You always trump everything, right? If you're mentally and physically, you're able to make decisions, they're always going to look to you to make those decisions. But in the case you're not able to make those decisions, then make sure that person is well informed about what your wishes are, what your desires are. But talking to a physician can help you crystallize, help you understand what the variables are. Because most people, it's hard to, unless you're a medical professional, it's hard to understand all the different, case in point, my mom had Alzheimer's probably, died of Alzheimer's, but she spent the last 2 years, 3 years in a nursing home, last 6 months in a fetal position, didn't recognize anybody. You know, and you sort of always think, well, mom's gonna get better, mom's gonna get better. Well, she had a wound that developed because, you know, I don't know, maybe they weren't moving, and so they said, well, listen, you know, maybe the infection of the wound is, you know, causing her to have decreased cognitive abilities, and if we can just get that wound healed, maybe that will improve. Well, so you wanna hope for anything, right? And I should have known in the back of my head that, you know, mom wasn't gonna get better, but I approved them putting a feeding tube. She couldn't at that point eat on her own, so, and she wasn't getting enough nutrition to heal the wound. That was the thinking. And so, you know, we put a feeding tube. She went in the hospital, and the wound got better, but every time mom would go into the hospital, she got worse. So then, guess what happened? She comes back to the nursing home, she still has a feeding tube in. So anyway, long story. Eventually, we had to go through hoops, because you got to then meet with the ethic committees, and you have to get the doctor to approve to take the feeding tube out. Long story short, they didn't think mom was going to be able to eat. She started to swallow. She didn't think she could swallow. She started to eat like a champ, but she still was not aware of anything. I mean, the body, I think, just wants to survive, so there's some involuntary reflexes like eating that will continue even after you're no longer able to. So, but it just, you know, I hate to be, you know, it sounds morbid, but you know, the fact it's reality, and you just need to understand some of the nuances behind decision making, especially towards the end of life. And your doctor is your best source for that conversation.
And Paley will let you put something on file?
I think so. No, good question. I haven't asked that question, but I have to believe that they all, you know, you have a medical record at Paoli if you've been to Paoli. Yes, they always ask you, don't they? Should ask you when you go in, do you have an advance directive? Do you have a living will? That's pretty much a standard question these days for mostly everywhere you go that's going to treat you. You know, if you're going to be there overnight especially.
Can you explain the difference between an advance directive and a living will?
Well, a living will is a type of advance directive. So, you know, a healthcare proxy or a surrogate, you know, that would be a type of advance directive. A pulse document would be a type of advance directive. So it's just different. You know, and some of those words are used interchangeably, so.
Does it differ from state to state?
It does, yeah, it does. In
That's
fact,
the other.
Pennsylvania has certain, I mean, for example, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment, there are different forms of that, and different states approve different versions, so you really do need to understand the state regulations, but there can be differences. What else can I answer? Anything else? So, you know, I urge you to, if you haven't thought about them, or even if you have thought about them, somehow document them and have the conversation. Have the conversation with your family members, have the conversation with your medical professionals, and make sure people know that it's not just on a piece of paper somewhere. You wrote it on the back, but I did document it, it's on the back of the envelope.
You and Abe Lincoln.
So, yes.
But you don't have your name on it.
Yeah, it's Gary Morgan. I'm sorry. I actually brought the wrong business cards. I have versions that have my name on it. I apologize for that. But Gary Morgan, I'm on the I think I'm on the website. But if you send me an email, you can send an email to Gary@goldenyearsadvisory.net also. That will get to me, and I'll be happy to, you know, I'll send you my contact information should you need it for any purpose.
Sometimes it all feels overwhelming, so is there really a way to navigate
Yeah, I think
individually?
I think there is. Take it in small chunks, you know, and I think, you know, you take it, I mean, first you should have a will. If you don't have a will, you need
Right.
to have a will. Second most important thing is an advance directive, it's just sort of, you know, maybe if you're in your 30s, you know, but everybody really needs one. But I would say those are the two really important things, and then, you know, depending on how much assets or things you have, that you know, I think there's a certain advantage to, like, we had, like, I was only my brother and I know some families, they get torn up over arguing about, you know, different things. So to the extent that you can eliminate all of that before it happens, I think that's a good thing.
And if you can give it while you're still breathing and alive and enjoy your family, your loved ones, your grandchildren enjoying it.
Right.
Then that's less to have to be split up later on.
Absolutely. Yeah, within reason, you know, you gotta always balance between giving it away and preserving what you need for yourself, because none of us know how long we're gonna need it. And, I was telling Mark back there that I have my two in-laws are 91 years old, rest of them, they're living independently up in New Hampshire for the summer, and they're doing great and still driving, and, you know, they got their aches and pains, but we worry about them every day waiting for the phone call. But they have some people to come in and help them, and they have a good support structure.
And talking about giving stuff away, I just learned about the look-back law. The 5 years that they're trying now to make 7 years, and if you give money away to your children and you happen to need it later on, the government or the medical profession can force the kids to give the money back.
So,
Wait, what?
so the look-back rule is Medicaid, right? So, long-term care, if you have to, there's certain conditions, right, which eventually you will require nursing home care. I didn't necessarily want to put my mom into a nursing home, but her mental condition was such that the only way she could be cared for safely was to go into a nursing home with 24/7 nurse around-the-clock care. So, you know, costs a lot of money to go into a nursing home. So it can cost $140,000 a year, or whatever, depending, I don't know, location and where it is. So most people kind of eat through. I think the average, you know, and I hate to get more, I just happen to consult with the nursing home industry, so I know some of these statistics. I think the average person lives 7 years, you know, 7 years in when they go into a nursing home, you do live for a pretty long time. Well, a lot of times you eat up all your assets, and so you have to apply for Medicaid. And I think Medicaid pays for like 65% of all long-term care needs. So, you know, that's why there's a lot of agita and arguing over the whole Medicaid program, and, you know, there's certain people that want to cut back, and then how are those benefits? Well, it's going to affect all of us, because no matter, you know, you can have what you think is a decent amount of money, and, you know, after, it doesn't take long before that gets eaten up. So the look-back rule, what they said was, they can now go back 5 years and look at all your transfers. So if you gave $20,000, I mean, if you gave a large lump sum to your child or your son or daughter, well, they would recapture that. Not that they would ask you to pay the money, but it would impact when you would qualify for Medicaid. So they might delay your Medicaid qualification for 3-4 months.
You mean the child's Medicare? Or
No, not the child's, yours. So if they look back over 5 years, and during that 5 years you had a series of cases where you gave $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 just because, you know, you were being nice. You could afford it at the time. You were feeling good. They needed help. You were going to give them financial help. Well, theoretically, the look-back rule dictates that they can go and identify. They'll go back. They'll ask for 5 years of financial records. They will identify those payments, and they will take that into account when they qualify, put you through the qualification for Medicaid. And in some cases, they will say, okay, you can't qualify for Medicaid until we sort of recapture that money in the qualification. And what that typically means is, it's not that they ask for the money to be paid back necessarily, but they say, okay, based on the amount of money that was given away, that would have paid for about 3 or 4 months of private pay nursing home care. So you can't qualify for Medicaid for 3 or 4. Well, what do you do in those 3 or 4 months? You know, there's no easy answer. I don't know that, you know, it's different for each case, but it can be crazy, right?
Get the money from the kids, let them pay for that 3 months.
Yeah, but you know, it's so that's what the look back rule, and what she was saying, that they're looking to increase that to 7.
7 years.
Because, you know, none of the states don't have the money and that's one of the downsides, right? Where the number of people that are aging, it's putting the states into some severe budgetary issues because of the cost of long-term care. So that's why you see a lot of these, Pennsylvania community health choices, well, it's going to a managed Medicaid program. So what they're gonna have now is an insurance company be the gatekeeper for all the Medicaid services that exist. So the theory is that they're gonna be able to better allocate those services more efficiently. But the other reality is they're gonna attempt to, they're gonna negotiate lower rates for all those providers, so they're gonna, the services may not be as good because the providers are not gonna get paid. They weren't getting paid a lot to begin with, but, it's sort of like, if you remember when HMOs sort of first came into existence, I mean, that was, you had a gatekeeper, the HMO, and they negotiated, everybody, if you want to be in our network, you have to accept these payment rates. So Pennsylvania is going, and that's going to start, it's January of 2019 in this southeastern Pennsylvania, starting out west, 6 months earlier or so. But, and there's lots of meetings and planning going on now around that. But, so that will just, and that'll impact on how you access any Medicaid services. And they're trying to integrate behavioral health care services into that as well. But, I don't know, where all the money comes from now. I know Pennsylvania has had its challenges, right? I know a couple of years ago they couldn't balance, but and they found some more money from some of the increased sin taxes, like gambling and things like that. But at some point, that money goes away. Like there's a finite bucket with that money in it. So either taxes have to go up or services have to go down. And it's all pretty scary.
Because as a rule, many Americans are living longer. I mean, the longevity of life is longer. I mean, are they saying, like, suggesting what kind of money or income that you need to make it safely through to when you take your last breath? I mean, are they saying 2 million, 3 million, 5?
Yeah, and I think-
like what? Like
I
how
know.
much do we have to plan
And
to?
it's different for every, that's why you need to talk to a financial planner who can sort of look at what your current situation is and your lifestyle, and together with you sort of plan out how much you're gonna need based on actuarial tables, because it's all guesswork right now. We could get hit by a car tomorrow, or we could, all live to be 100 or 120. I think the
I like the latter choice.
French woman, Jean Calment, the
Oh,
old,
yeah.
117 years old. She's the oldest documented living person. She smoked, she drank, she never went to the doctors, never exercised, and she lived that long. But,
Wow.
so we're probably not living past 117. But if we all live to be 117 and pass in our sleep, that's what we all hope for. But, at what cost? Like, how much money is that gonna cost to live that long? That's the other thing, so. Yeah, you really have to, it's so different, right? There's no one answer. You really have to individually kind of sit down with a financial professional who can then take your situation and help you, kind of plan out how you can make it work, or what you need to do to make it work. And I know some good ones I can refer you if you like.
That's what I'm curious about, like, what does your business offer, and what do you charge? Like, you have
Well,
a consultation, or?
Well, we have, I mean, there's a number of professionals that would be associated with Golden Years that I can recommend. And what I know is that anybody I recommend is sort of quality people. So, there's not, I mean, it's mostly, again, it just depends on, what kind of services you need. But, with financial professionals, they're usually looking to help you plan, and if you have some money they would like you to invest with them, and they get a percentage of that investment, that's how they get paid. Or they might represent certain insurance products and they get paid that way. So you just have to be always careful that they have your best interest in mind, that they're not sort of thinking about their paycheck first. And I think in most cases, they've really tightened up the ethics, in the financial services industry. So, I know everybody that's in that industry that I talk to is just very cautious about how they represent information, because now there's regulations that govern exactly what they can say and how they can say it, and so they have to be sort of above board. But, you know, it's like there's always bad apples everywhere. But that's, our group is sort of, you know, we wanted to create an organization where you could have a single point of contact and then feel good about, you know, whatever referral relationships came out of that. And, you know, then you sort of also had, and in a lot of these cases, you know, there's so much overlap with all these, you know, healthcare and finance and legal, a lot of times there's overlap. So it helps to have people that know and trust each other, and you can have, you know, an integrated sort of solution, because, you know, you can have a lawyer that's, you know, making sure that they're talking to the financial person,
Right.
and then if there's healthcare issues. So that's important. I mean, I don't know if I answered your question entirely, but it's a complex, it can be complex, but what I can say, if there was, I'd be happy to suggest to you and a professional if you were interested in talking to someone. So just let me know. But there's plenty of good ones out there, and, you know, I would say, you know, there's a lot of good ones out there. Any other questions? Thanks for coming. Don't hesitate to use those email. You know, contact me if you think of something afterwards. I'm always happy to answer. No charge.
At that, goldenyearsadvisory.net.
Yeah, goldenyearsadvisory.net. Yeah, we're actually going to be improving the website to provide some more content and maybe some answers, you know, answer some of these questions on the site, but to also create a platform where we can facilitate referrals to people as well.
What geographic area is your group in? I mean, is it
Yeah, so we're
local or?
mostly in Chester County, but we're, you know, Chester, Montgomery, but southeastern Pennsylvania. Philadelphia is a different market, so we don't really do too much in the Philadelphia market. But the other 4 counties, you know, we could deal in. Gary Morgan, yes. And I'm actually even out in Lancaster County now, so I'm trying to extend a little bit out. I'll be talking to some of the healthcare providers out there.
Yeah, one.